That's what the chaplain does. He pitches his tent, he lives with his people, and he does what they do, and he provides service. And my last assignment, I was assigned to take care of all the faith groups, the Army, Navy, and Air Force and Marines, for all the Jewish, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Christian, all the different Catholic, everybody, whatever they needed. I was over 30 years in the Army active duty, and then before that I was in the Air Force as a chaplain candidate program. And I went to undergrad here at ORU, and I went to graduate school, seminary at ORU. What I found was that ORU gave me a great foundation, because many chaplains went through schools that were only one denominational square box. And when they got into the military, where they had to go outside that box, they were lost.
Yes.
As well as dealing with other faith groups. At ORU, I had an Orthodox Christian professor, I had Catholic professor, I had Presbyterian, I had an American Baptist, I had Methodists, I had all kinds of different teachers, Pentecostal. And so I had a whole breadth of knowledge from the university. They were charismatic, but they were various denominations.
Yes.
And so that gave me a breadth of knowledge that many of my peers did not have.
Right.
And so going into the chaplaincy, it is multi-faith. So you have all different kinds of people coming into the chaplaincy itself. And then you also are reaching out to people, and in this situation, it's in the school system, who are from multi-faith backgrounds or no faith backgrounds. And so that's the one thing that a chaplain has, though, is confidentiality.
Yes.
So that's critically important. We have it by regulation in the military, but each state may have their own. You have to check and see what the state laws are where you are. Usually for child abuse, it's a must report. And there are certain things that are must reports, but other than that, you don't have to report. And so people can come to the chaplain if they're in the school system, and you don't have to report.
Right.
So that's a safe person that they can talk to. One of the differences is most people don't really know the difference between a chaplain and a pastor.
Yes, explain those differences to us.
The pastor is usually concerned with getting people to his or her congregation, because that's where they get the money for their salary. Whereas a chaplain is usually paid by the institution, so he doesn't have to worry about trying to proselytize or trying to convert people to his particular or her particular denomination or background or the way that they see it, because he's or she is getting paid by the institution. So he has on one hat his faith group, but on the other hat, it's his institution that he's trying to protect and watch and care for the people that are in that institution.
That's a great point that you make, because a lot of people are concerned that a chaplain might do just that.
That's right. That's one of the fear they have based upon their experience with a pastor somewhere in their past. So they're reacting to their past rather than understanding what it is that you're talking about with a chaplain in their school system.
Yes.
So, and that's why in our history, we have people in the Senate as a chaplain who's not trying to convert everybody in the Senate. We have people that go to a Catholic hospital who are not getting converted to Catholicism, or people that go to a Jewish hospital that are not getting converted to Judaism. So, but they don't understand, and they just use that as an argument against, or they say, I don't want that person to see my kids.
Yes.
But we had a situation on one of our bases that I was at, where a person came in to me and said that this child is really getting close to suicide, and we need to do something. What do you recommend, chaplain? And I said, well, I think we need to go talk to their father, who was a prominent person in the community. And there was no way that this person who came to me was going to be able to get in that door. But I got in the door that afternoon, and I took that person with me, And we shared that their son was was at the door of suicide, and that they needed to be aware of that so they could take care of that. And this person knew all about suicide. They were in the medical field. Okay, so this is what a chaplain can do in the situations. I had another person that during lunch one day came in and knocked on my door and said, I need to talk to somebody. And I said, well, come on in. And we sat down, and as we talked, I realized that his person was losing it.
Wow.
And for a chaplain, remember, who has no weapon, when somebody's losing it, I don't want them to shoot themselves or me.
Yes.
Because in my foxhole, I don't have a weapon. So I picked this person. I said, let's go over and let me take you to see someone where we can get some help. So I put him in my vehicle, and we drove over to mental health.
Yes.
They were on lunch too. So I said, where are they? I know they're here somewhere. And they were in the back room. So I took this person, and we walked back to the back room, and I knocked on the door and opened the door, and I said, fellas, or whoever it was, I said, this person needs to see somebody right away. Can one of you help take care of this person?
Yes.
And they did. And so I left that person there. A few weeks later, that person came back and knocked on the door again and said, who owns this car out here? They didn't remember me, but they remembered the car. That's how out of touch they were with their suicidal and their different things they were going through. But a chaplain is responding to the need that is presented.
Yes.
And you respond to that need in a way that is going to help resolve the problem the best way you can in certain situations. And so you're dealing with everybody where they're at, and that's dealing with the staff in their situations, dealing with the students with their situations, and even, as was mentioned by another person, dealing with the parents with their situations. Because as you look back, as was mentioned with George Washington and Valley Forge, George didn't ask for counselors to come in. He asked for chaplains to come in and help the soldiers to get through that winter.
Yes.
And they did. And they came in because they had people dying up to 23 a day that winter. And that's how they were able to help them get through that difficult, challenging time.
Yes.
So that's what the chaplain can do in those situations. And you also find that if you lose a chaplain in a situation, then the whole morale in that unit goes down.
Speak to me about that, how that's demonstrated.
It just happens because it's kind of like one commander told me that when you come around chaplain, it's like you bring a presence of the eternal to the present.
Yes.
And it's just by being there that we can do that. But it's not every chaplain that happens with, because one chaplain they call the duffel bag chaplain. He was there in the corner, but that was it. You've got to be doing what needs to be done to be there and to be that part of the answer rather than just be there, stuck there or something like that.
So what type of a person would emulate a good chaplain? What do they look for? What type of skills?
It's somebody who cares about the people, who cares about what they're doing. That's what the chaplain does. He pitches his tent. He lives with his people, and he does what they do, and he provides service and spiritual for them wherever they are and whatever they're doing. He's there doing it too, except he doesn't have a weapon. He's not going to shoot anybody.
Yes.
But he can get shot.
That's
because
the risk.
He's experiencing the same things they're going through.
Yes.
And my last assignment, I was assigned to take care of all the faith groups, the Army, Navy, and Air Force and Marines, for all the Jewish, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Christian, all the different Catholic, everybody, whatever they needed to do their services for Passover, for Ramadan, for whatever they needed all over the world on aircraft carriers in the combat zones, whatever it was. It was my job to make sure that we got those things ordered and we flew them on planes that got there, because my boss got a call from a 4-star Air Force that said, do we have everything that we need for our Jewish people around the world? If not, I've got a plane on the ready to fly things wherever they need to go. And he called me in and asked me, are we good to go all over the world?
Yes.
And I said, yes, sir, we are.
But that speaks to the support that chaplains give, that is not just necessarily about the faith that you have, but also you want to care for the person who
because
needs.
the chaplain before me, they didn't have it already. So the first thing my prior commander told me to do was to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yes.
And I did.
So talk to me about the faith balance, because you're seeing multiple different faiths and you're servicing multiple different people, but you also have to stay true to who you are.
Yes, you stay true to who you are, and because you're endorsed by a certain people, you have to keep that endorsement in with you, and that you are fully endorsed by. So you cooperate and you take care of all of those needs. At the same time, you're taking care of the needs that you have. The chaplain is a problem solver before they get to be big problems.
Yes.
So, and that's the whole point in suicide prevention, is you try to identify and help people identify the needs, the depressed, those kinds of people who are needing and help. So you identify them and get them to a source for the help that they need before it becomes a problem that's too late.
Yes.
And then you're going into grief counseling and into funerals and other
things
kinds
like that.
of things that don't necessarily need to happen.
Yes. Earlier you were talking about the access that you were getting, and do you feel as if being notable in the field, you can give that type of access or gain a specific access that most others cannot have?
Yes, I think if they are assigned to the school and they are paid by the school, then they have automatic access because they're recognized by the institution. If they're a volunteer, they may or may not get recognized. They may or may not have any access. If they're a volunteer, and there's nothing against volunteers, it's just you got to fight for that credibility and you got to fight for that position. And it's all based on personality at that point. Whereas if you get into the institution and the institution has recognized it and gives it to you and you're getting paid by it, then you have that credibility and you have that access. Because if they turn you down and you do a memo for record, then if it hits the fan, I told you, nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And so if I go somewhere and make a recommendation and they don't take it, say, I had a general that I went in and made a recommendation, and he said that that's not going to change anything, Chaplain. We're in the middle of a combat situation, and it's not going to change. And I said, well, sir, I just thought that you needed to know. And that's why I needed to tell you, because the other staff aren't going to tell you. Wow. So I turned and walked away. And about 8 months later, he was pinning an award on me for doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's saving someone's life. It's also giving.
It was the staff. It was burning out.
Wow.
So because of what all was going on. But you just have to be willing to make those calls as you see them. And if they recognize that by that, he was the one who called me back later and told me to check on this other person who was having suicidal issues. And so I said, sir, it's better if he recommends himself to get help rather than a command referral.
Right.
And I said to him, let's give him overnight. I'll go talk to him. So I went and talked to him about referring himself rather than having a command referral on his record. And so he said, yes, you're right. Let me go turn myself to the guys.
So that speaks to the trust that you have as a chaplain.
Yes.
So
so the commander called me the next morning. Is he doing it? And I said, yes, sir, he is.
So they know that you're there for them. You're going to give the resources.
I'm there for them, and the commander knows that I'm doing what I think is right and what's best for in this case, an officer. Yeah.
That's good. So talk to me about the difference, because we see this argument quite a bit about the licensed counselor versus the chaplain. From your perspective, where do you see the differences?
The difference is that the chaplain's going to bring a spiritual element automatically that the other people may or may not appreciate, the other staff people who are doing the. So that's something that needs to be recognized from the get-go by the people doing the hiring. You don't get to be a chaplain just because you want it. You have to be accepted by the people who are doing the hiring. So you have to go through that process, and then they have to do the selection process. So usually that involves an interviewing process.
Yes.
In the Army, I sat on those boards, and they usually have a board that we select who are the best that we want to keep and go through that process. So I would assume that the school would do the same thing they do for teachers, is to have a committee that goes through and picks who they want to hire. For those teachers would be the same process they would go through to hire to be this chaplain person, and they would want to get the best that they could. So that's where the write-ups and where all of the things of your packet is going to be that you would hire the best person. And so wanting to work in a multi-faith environment, wanting to help and work with children, the students wanting to work with staff, wanting to be a team player, that you're not in there trying to tear down people or whatever, because some people want to be kingdom builders, and in the chaplaincy, we weed those out, We don't build kingdoms. They don't get promoted because of report card time. It shows. So you just have to be selective of what it is that, what kind of person you want to have on those situations.
Interesting. I'm curious about, you talked about they bring in the spiritual element right away.
Yes.
Why is that important to the care?
Because it's left out. It's left out right now. They have, they act like it doesn't exist. And yet that's what is needed, and that's what they've eliminated. And so it's not like you come in with it like a sledgehammer. It's like you come in and make it like it's for them, it's going to be a new element, but it's an element that most people understand. Why is it that we have a National Day of Prayer? It's not that we all believe there's various ways to the one way. Okay, so you have that kind of conflict, but you worship and you add the spiritual dimension.
Yes, indeed. Your last thoughts. I'm curious about the chaplain perspective in school for those who are probably looking at becoming a chaplain or considering if this is something that they should go into. What would you say to that person appropriating this to the education system?
It needs to be a calling. Living in that pup tent and going and doing what the Army requires and all over different things is what a calling.
Yes.
And going into a school, you got to love kids, and you got to have a sense of humor when you're around kids. Okay, it's a calling, and it's just like calling to be a pastor or calling to be an evangelist or calling to be whoever it is. It's got to be a calling led by the Lord. I was called when I was 17 into the ministry, and then my brother went into the Air Force, and then I went to visit my brother, and I saw the ministry of a chaplain in the Air Force, and that's why I went Air Force first, because I saw that ministry and it was a calling.
Yes.
They didn't have any slots for Air Force chaplains at the time, so I went Army and was glad that I did and have loved it. But you just have to find that calling and then see where the Lord leads you.
Yes, amen.
If it's a chaplaincy, that's one type of ministry. pastoring is another calling. And then, it has to be what the Lord lays on your heart. And I just enjoyed what somebody said about going into the medical field and then changing and going to other places. You just have to see where the Lord leads you to do, and then how long to stay there.
Yes.
30 years was a long haul, but I know that was where the Lord called me.
That's great. And I am so grateful that you were able to articulate the chaplain definition. I know so many people are wondering what actually that is. And so you've brought a perspective that is very educational to the audience. And I know that they'll be well informed because of your knowledge. Thank you so much again.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you so much.